So today me and Trassel is gonna show you how to make well, I guess you could call it a bitter.
It's actually my mother. She asked me to make a Christmas beer for her apartment complex, and well, she didn't want anything too crazy. I suggested to do something like a vanilla and chocolate porter, but we ended up doing a British bitter instead, which I think will work out great. So I'm gonna start with 8 kilograms of pale ale malt. Together with this, I'm gonna use some caramel, some calcium carbonate, lactic acid. I'm gonna use some yeast nutrition, yeast Kent Goldinger hops. I'm gonna use some Protafloc. You could use Irish moss as well. For yeast, I'm gonna use the Seyfel US 05. It's probably the most popular yeast amongst homebrewers. First, we're gonna talk about water, which is your primary ingredient. It's about 97% of your beer is water. I live in Sweden, in Gothenburg. We have very soft water with a very low mineral content. I always add some form of calcium back into the water just to get my efficiency up a bit. So here you can see me put my home brewing kit up. It's very much a home-built thing. I've been brewing for a very long time, and I'm always looking at making small changes to my brew system just to get it where I want it to be. So the first thing is I'm gonna fill up my kettle with water. My kettle takes 50 liters. We're gonna need about 55 or 56 liters in the end. I'm gonna add the other 5 or 6 liters later just to bring down the temperature. First I'm gonna heat the water to 75 degrees, and after the water is heated I'm gonna transfer it to my mash tun. I usually start off with a little bit less water than I think I need because I can always add water afterwards, but it's very hard to take water away. So here you see me putting in the different kinds of malt. Always be sure to stir vigorously. I'm adding the malt and it will drop the temperature down by about 8 or 9 degrees. That's the reason why I start with 75-degree water, is because the temperature is going to drop once the grain gets into the mash tun. So always add a little bit at a time and stir a lot. If you don't, you might get dough balls and your efficiency won't be good, and you will end up with weaker beer than you anticipated, and it's just a waste of malt anyway. So make sure you have no dough ball. Just take good care of your mash tun. So the temperature in the mash tun, together with the temperature of your fermentation, is one of the most important things when it comes to changing the texture and the flavor of beer. A drop in 1 degree will give you a completely different beer. It's still probably gonna be a delicious beer, but if you made one beer and then you try to replicate it and you follow all of your recipe to the point, and it still tastes different, it's gonna be probably because of the change in temperature in the mash tun or in the fermentation chamber. So you can see that I have a thicker mash than I anticipated. So now I'm gonna add back a little bit more water. The reason why I'm doing this is because I need water to be quite free-flowing in the kettle, although I want to use as little as possible at this stage, and I want to use most of my water for sparging. When the mash is this thick, it's gonna give me a real workout while stirring it, and I'm afraid I won't be able to get rid of all the dough balls if I can't really go down and scrape the bottom as much as I want to. So I'm adding back more water. Now the consistency is somewhat like quite watery porridge, which is what I prefer to work with. Now here you can see me sprinkling some of that calcium carbonate, and I'm doing this to up the calcium level and also give me a more malt forward flavor. Now what I usually do is, after I mixed everything together, I let it sit for a little while. I check the temperature and I check the pH level. So here you can see I'm checking the pH level. Right now it's at 5.5 and I want to drop it down to 5.2. And this is where my lactic acid comes in. So I've done this a couple of times before, and I know that a teaspoon of lactic acid will drop me down from a 5.5 to a 5.2. I'm gonna fill up my hot liquor tank with cold water to drop the temperature down to 66.5 degrees. I'm gonna open up the valves and turn on my pump. So as you can see, the water comes out quite bright and very, very cloudy. But after about 60 minutes, the water will run completely clear. So now that the water is running clear, I'm gonna increase my temperature by 10 degrees, let it go for 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna run it off into the boil kettle. During the time I'm running it off to the brew kettle, I'm also sparging with the water in my hot liquor tank, bringing it on top and letting it run through the grains. Now, once it's in the boil kettle, I'm gonna increase the temperature to a maximum and try to get a boil going. When the temperature reaches around 90 degrees, you will see a thick white foam building up on the surface of the kettle. This is a bunch of proteins and solids, and you want to get rid of as much as possible. Some people leave it in, but it will give you a cloudier beer. It won't taste wrong or anything like that. I have a lot of friends who don't say they like homebrewed beer, so I try to make my beer look as professional as possible. So here you can see I'm adding the full pack, 100 gram of yeast Kent Goldinger hops, and I let it go for 40 minutes before adding my second addition of yeast Kent Goldinger hops, as well as my yeast nutritions and the Protafloc, the clarifying agent, which are both recommended to be in the boil kettle for 15 minutes. Now while doing this, you can see I've added a coil to my pot. This is how I'm gonna chill my beer. Unfortunately, I didn't film it at this time. After filling up my 2 carboys, I add the yeast, and after I added the yeast, I give them a good shake to rehydrate the yeast and give it a good start. So this is after 3 days. I had a much more aggressive fermentation in the beginning, but I forgot to film it. As you can see, it's still going strong, and I think in another 3 or 4 days, the primary fermentation is going to be finished.
So taste-wise, it's a very malty body. It's quite a full-bodied beer. Has a little bit of bitterness from the hops. Okay. Has a little bit of bitterness from the hops. It's very nice. Unfortunately, Dassel is too young to drink, but I think he would enjoy it as well. Cheers.